Shadowrun Returns is an apt name for the new turn-based RPG from developer Harebrained Schemes. It refers not to the reemergence of the shooter from 2007, but rather to the original and beloved series that graced the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and the tops of tables long before that. Not only that, it marks a return to the kind of text-based exposition that fell out of fashion with today's reliance on voice-based narratives, and it marks a return to a pre-internet cyberpunk aesthetic that should feel comfortable to readers of novelist William Gibson. Above all, it marks a return to a style of gaming that largely departed with the Clinton administration. But with some qualifications, Shadowrun Returns handles it so expertly that it feels at once fresh and inviting for newcomers. Much of the appeal springs from the setting, a world in the next century where orcs, elves, dwarves, and trolls share the hopes and dreams and living arrangements of humans. It's also, more prosaically, Seattle. But this incarnation of the Emerald City bears little resemblance to the metropolis. Here, deadbeats plug into addictive better-than-life entertainment experiences in the festering ruins of Pike Place Fish Market, and nearby Redmond now plays host to far more shady groups than the developers behind Internet Explorer. It helps that Shadowrun Returns uses this environment to present numerous scenes of surprising beauty, despite the intentional isometric simplicity. What lies beyond this setup is a strange but appealing mixture of high fantasy and hard-boiled noir. There is you, for instance, who can play as a human or as any of the fantasy-themed races across a wide range of classes like mages or the street samurai, or even interact with a digital wonderland called, yes, the Matrix, through decking, Shadowrun's term for hacking. As a side benefit, you're not limited to the special abilities of your class. If your mage wants to cast aside the spells for a bit and simply rely on an AK-47 or a shotgun, she can. Better still, a massive RPG skill point system based on karma allows you to make your weapons more powerful than your spells if you so desire. Alas, some of Shadowrun Returns' rough edges reveal themselves in the actual accumulation of these points. Despite the variety in the conversation options, real freedom of choice is more illusionary. Generally, you get karma points solely by playing the good guy, and while prompts give you options for gruff or rude responses based on your class or point distribution, you never really have the chance to turn into a true renegade. Worse yet, much as in XCOM, many of the mercenaries you can pick up throughout your journey are little more than a means to an end. Only one manages to distinguish herself enough to warrant remembering. It's also startlingly linear. Even with many of the maps boasting impressive sizes, it's usually in service of running from point A to point B, and occasionally serving as cover in the competent turn-based combat. In many other RPGs, this would be an unforgivable fault, but Shadowrun Returns does much to make up for it through the sheer quality of the writing. Some of the responses from a single secondary character could fill an entire typewritten page, but the mix of film noir and fantasy it's coded in is handled so deftly that you'll want to savor every word. It's so good, in fact, that Harebrained seems to have cut down the running time in order to accommodate the quality and nibble out the extraneous bits, as playing through the whole plot should only take around 6 to 8 hours. That is, of course, unless you find your progress hampered by the frustratingly sparse checkpoints, which may mark too much of a return to 90s-style gaming for modern players' tastes. Good thing then that Harebrained has given us a way to return to Shadowrun after that initial playthrough. Included is a complex editor that may intimidate casual players, but provides countless chances to craft original stories using the game's impressive cache of assets. In this way, Shadowrun Returns honors not only the games from its console past, but also the veterans of the old tabletop game, who can now bring their decade-old scenarios to life. It's worth noting that Shadowrun Returns gained its funding through Kickstarter, and as such it delivers yet another welcome riposte to criticisms that the service has produced only a handful of polished games. Quite the contrary. Despite the limits of its playtime and the absence of true choice, Shadowrun Returns heralds a needed return of the blend of core story and user-generated content that made the original Neverwinter Nights game so enjoyable. Couple that with a surprisingly attractive vision of a world where fantasy and sci-fi kiss and make up, and you'll find that Harebrained has given us more than enough material to keep the shadows running long into the future.